You know that feeling when your phone buzzes, and for half a second, before you even look, your stomach drops? Because it might be your bank. It might be a bill you forgot. It might be the thing that makes this month the month everything finally falls apart. And then it's just a notification from an app you don't even use. And you breathe. And you go back to whatever you were doing. And the low hum of it never really goes away. That's not anxiety in the clinical sense. That's what happens when your financial situation is genuinely precarious and your brain knows it, even when you're trying not to think about it. Here's what nobody tells you about people who are one paycheck away from disaster. They call you irresponsible. You're actually someone making impossible calculations every single month with numbers that were never designed to add up. They call you bad with money. You're actually someone who has become an expert at stretching what you have further than most people ever have to. They call you living paycheck to paycheck. What they don't say is that 63% of Americans are doing the same thing right now. Not because they're all irresponsible, but because the math stopped working for most people a long time ago. You're not failing. You're surviving a system that was designed with very little margin for people like you. Here's the thing. There's a name for what your brain does when financial security disappears. Researchers call it hypervigilance, a state of chronic alertness where the nervous system stays permanently elevated, scanning for threats that may or may not arrive. It's the same neurological response your body uses in genuinely dangerous situations. Except in your case, the danger isn't occasional. It's structural. It's every month, every bill, every unexpected expense that arrives like a small explosion in a life with no room for explosions. And here's what makes it particularly exhausting. Hypervigilance doesn't turn off when the immediate threat passes. It recalibrates. The moment one bill gets paid, the brain immediately locates the next vulnerability. The car that's been making that sound. The dentist appointment you've been putting off for 8 months. The renewal coming up that you haven't figured out yet. There is always a next thing. And your nervous system knows that. So it never fully stands down. This is not a personality flaw. This is your brain doing its job under conditions it was never designed to sustain indefinitely. But then there's something else happening here. Researchers at Princeton studying the psychology of scarcity found something that reframes the entire conversation about financial struggle. When people are operating under conditions of financial pressure, the cognitive bandwidth available for everything else – planning, decision-making, self-regulation, long-term thinking – shrinks dramatically. Not because of who they are, because of what the pressure does to the brain. The mental load of managing a precarious financial situation consumes the equivalent of 13 IQ points of cognitive capacity. That's the same impact as losing a full night of sleep every single day. So you're trying to work well, parent well, think clearly, make good decisions, plan for a future, all while running a constant background calculation that never stops and never resolves. And when you can't do all of those things perfectly, the world calls it poor judgment. What it actually is an overloaded system doing the best it can with what it has. Now, here's where it gets interesting. There's a specific psychological response that develops in people who live in sustained financial precarity, and it shapes everything: relationships, self-perception, the way you move through the world. Psychologists call it financial shame. And unlike regular stress, shame doesn't just make you feel bad. It makes you hide. It makes you avoid conversations, avoid looking at your account balance, avoid asking for help, avoid the very actions that might actually improve your situation. Because the act of confronting it means confronting the story you've been telling yourself about what it says about you. And the story most people have been given is brutal. If you're struggling financially, it's because of choices you made. Somewhere, someone is pointing at a latte. Somewhere, someone is talking about avocado toast. The narrative that financial precarity is a personal moral failure is so deeply embedded in the culture, that people who are genuinely working full-time jobs, genuinely trying, genuinely doing everything right, still lie awake at 3 a.m. wondering what's wrong with them. Not what's wrong with the system, what's wrong with them. That shame is not an accident. It's a feature. Shame keeps people isolated. Isolated people don't organize. And people who don't organize don't demand structural change. But let's clear something up. The personal finance industry has built an empire on the premise that financial struggle is a knowledge problem. If you just knew the right budgeting method, the right app, the right framework, if you just had enough discipline and information, you could fix this. And so the books sell. The courses sell. The 6 Steps to Financial Freedom content gets millions of views. What that industry will not tell you, because it cannot afford to, is that for a significant portion of the population, the problem is not information. It's income. It's that rent has increased by 40% in 5 years, while wages have increased by 8. It's that a single medical emergency costs more than most people make in a month. It's that the emergency fund advice assumes you have money left over after covering the basics. And for a growing number of people, that assumption is simply false. You cannot budget your way out of a structural income problem. And the fact that the system keeps suggesting you can is not helpful advice. It's a way of keeping the conversation about your behavior instead of its design. Here's what they don't tell you. The fact that you are still here, still paying what you can, still showing up, still keeping things together with margins so thin most people wouldn't believe you if you told them. That is not a small thing. Yeah, most people have never had to do what you do. They have never had to hold that many variables in their head simultaneously, make that many calculations before a single purchase, absorb that many small shocks without a safety net to catch them. The cognitive and emotional labor of living at the financial edge is immense. It is invisible, and it is almost never acknowledged. You are not someone who failed to plan. You are someone who has been planning constantly, under pressure, with insufficient resources, in a system that keeps moving the goalposts and calling it your fault when you can't keep up. That's not failure. That's an extraordinary amount of endurance. And endurance, quiet, unglamorous, unphotographable endurance, is one of the hardest things a person can do. So the next time someone tells you to just cut back, just save more, just make better choices, and you feel that familiar mix of shame and exhaustion, remember that the advice is not wrong because you're not trying hard enough. It's wrong because it's answering the wrong question. The question was never about your choices. It was about the conditions your choices are being made in. You are not one paycheck away from disaster because of who you are. You are one paycheck away from disaster because of where the line was drawn. And there is a meaningful difference between those two things. Even when the world keeps trying to convince you, there isn't. Now tell me, are you team, I don't even look at my balance anymore because it's too stressful, or team, I check it constantly because not knowing feels worse? Drop it in the comments. You're not alone down there. And if this video made you feel seen in something you've never been able to say out loud, hit subscribe. We're here every week breaking down the psychology of work that nobody talks about. Because understanding why you are the way you are, that's not just interesting. That's powerful.